What if the greatest question in the history of Middle-earth had been answered from above? What if the war that required 9 walkers, 3 rings, and 3 ages of accumulated grief had been solved in an afternoon, by wings? And what if the victory that everyone wanted turned out to be the one thing the world was not ready to receive? Today on Scholar of the Rings, we put our scholarship and imagination into answering the oldest question in Tolkien's fandom. What if the eagles had flown the ring to Mordor? The date is October 25, Third Age, 3018. The location is the courtyard and the open council ground of Rivendell, Imladris, the last homely house. Hidden in its valley between the arms of the Brunnen with the smell of cold water and old stone and pine resin coming off the surrounding slopes in the particular way it does in late autumn, when the warmth has gone from the air before the cold has fully arrived and everything smells of the transition between them. The Council of Elrond is in its 4th hour. The air above the council ground is the specific air of a high valley, in autumn, clean, thin, carrying the conversations of the falls somewhere below the terrace, with the patient indifference of water that has been here longer than the meeting and will be here after. Around the low table of carved stone sit beings, whose combined grief exceeds the span of human history. Elrond half-elven, whose face carries more than 4,000 years of watching things he built eventually fall. Gandalf, leaning on his staff with the specific posture of a man who is conserving energy for a very long road. Boromir of Gondor, whose pride has the specific quality of a wall that has been weight-bearing for so long it has forgotten it was ever built for a particular threat. Legolas, still and attending. Gimli, solid as the stone he was bred to read. And among them, small and very still, a hobbit from the Shire named Frodo Baggins, with a piece of gold on a chain around his neck that is the reason every other person at this table has traveled hundreds of miles to be here. Elrond is speaking. The words are the words of the canonical record, the history of the ring, the failure of Isildur, the long shadow of the Third Age's slow defeat, and everyone present is listening, with the quality of attention that people bring to information they already know, but must hear said aloud before they can act on it. Because the saying aloud is what makes the knowing official. They are listening to the case being built for what must happen next. Then the shadow comes. It arrives before the sound does. This is the thing about very large birds. The wingspan that displaces the air above them also displaces the light, and the light's displacement travels outward faster than the wing beat's sound, and so the first indication is simply a darkening, a specific, directional darkening that moves across the council ground from north to south with the speed of something falling, and the silence of something that does not need to announce itself. The quality of the light changes. The stone of the terrace goes from afternoon gold to shadow and back to gold, and then the shadow returns and stays. Elrond stops speaking mid-sentence. He does not stop because he is startled. He stops because he has lived for more than 6,000 years, and he knows the geometry of that shadow. He has seen it twice before in his long life, once at the end of the First Age when the eagles came to the war that ended Morgoth's dominion, and once in the Second Age at the shores of Inmenor before the sea took everything. He knows what the geometry of that particular shadow means, and the meaning is too large for the sentence he was in the middle of, so he stops. Everyone looks up. Gwaihir the Windlord descends into the valley of Rivendell with the specific aerodynamics of a creature that does not need to hurry, because hurrying is a concept for beings whose arrival is uncertain. His wings do not beat rapidly. They make long, deep, unhurried strokes that cover distances that other wings would exhaust themselves to cover, each stroke a commitment of mass and muscle that produces, when observed from below, the distinct impression of a sky being used correctly for the first time. He is the color of old bronze at the wingtips, and the color of the sky he comes from at the breast, the high, cold, colorless sky above the clouds where even the eagles go only when the Elder King has something to say. He lands at the courtyard's edge. The impact of his talons on the stone is not violent. It is final, the specific quality of weight placed precisely, by something that knows exactly where it is going, and has known since before it left. The stone does not crack. It was old elven stone, built for permanence, but it registers the contact in the way that stone registers contact with something heavier than anything built on human scales. A vibration, not a sound, felt in the chest before the ears have caught up. He does not speak. The Valar do not send letters. They send arrivals. And this arrival in its timing, its size, its absolute unceremonious completeness, is the message. The Council of Elrond, which has been 4 hours in the building, which has drawn the most significant assembly of mortal and immortal wisdom since the last alliance, which has been working toward a decision with the gravity of a choice that will determine the fate of the world, is over. The decision has been made above the pay grade of everyone sitting around the table, and the eagle's presence is the notification. Frodo's hand moves to the chain around his neck without his deciding to move it. It is a reflex, the specific reflex of someone carrying something that other people keep looking at, heightened now into the reflex of something that understands, before its bearer does, that its status in the world has just changed. His fingers close around it. The ring is warm. Elrond looks at Gwaihir for a long time. Then he looks at Frodo. The expression on his face is not relief. It is not even precisely surprise. It is the expression of a very old man who has been holding a particular weight for a very long time and has just been told that the weight will be taken, and who understands in the moment of the telling. That being relieved of a weight is not the same as being unburdened by it. Across the valley, in the smith's quarter of Rivendell, where the Fellowship's equipment has been 6 weeks in preparation, an elf smith looks up from the blade he is finishing. He has been working on it since September, the specific unhurried work of a craftsman who knows the road ahead is long and dangerous, and that the thing in his hands might be the difference between a life and its absence. The balance is correct. The edge is finished. He has done his work. He hears the silence from the council ground in the way that silence can be heard when the sound it replaces was weight-bearing. He looks down at the blade in his hands. He looks up the path toward the council, where the shadow of Gwaihir's folded wings is still cooling the afternoon light. He sets the blade against the wall, with the careful deliberateness of someone placing something down that they do not intend to pick up again. He does not know yet, in any precise sense, what has happened. But the valley knows, and the stone knows, and the blade in his hands knows with the certainty of metal that the hand it was made for is not coming. It is the first unnecessary thing made in the Third Age. It will not be the last. 7 eagles depart Rivendell at the 3rd hour after noon. This is the count that matters, not 9, the number of the fellowship that was being assembled before the shadow fell across the council ground, but 7, Gwaihir the Windlord, and 6 of his kin whose names are not recorded in any chronicle of the Third Age, because the chroniclers of the Third Age were men and elves who wrote in valleys and towers, and the eagles do not descend to be recorded. They are known to Mondu. That is the only record that has ever mattered to them. The formation they take on departure is not military. It is functional. The geometry of 7 large bodies moving through mountain air in a configuration that minimizes turbulence for the central carrier while maximizing the sightlines of the 6 who flank him. Gwaihir at the point. 2 eagles to the left and right at echelon, 2 more behind those, wider, 1 above and behind, watching the sky that the formation's forward attention cannot cover. It is the formation of beings who have been moving through dangerous air since before the sun was made, and who have long since stopped distinguishing between the tactical and the habitual. Frodo is on Gwaihir's back. He is in a harness that the elves of Rivendell constructed in 3 hours from materials they had not originally planned to use for this, a leather and rope arrangement that distributes his weight across the eagle's upper back, holds him below the windbreak of Gwaihir's neck, and prevents him from being moved by the specific enormous turbulence that a body the size of Gwaihir's generates in its own wake. The harness works. He is not in danger of falling. He is, in the most precise sense available, cargo, an object being transported from one location to another by a carrier, in a harness, with the safety of the object as the primary engineering concern. He has not spoken since Rivendell cleared the valley's edge and the high air took them. The misty mountains unreal below the formation in the long sequence of their geography, ridge after ridge, each one lower than the one behind it as they move south and east toward Rohan's northern borders. From this altitude the mountains are not what they are on the ground. On the ground the misty mountains are weather, are wind, are cold that gets into the joints of armor and the gaps between cloaks, are passes that close without warning and remain closed until the season decides otherwise. From this altitude they are landform, the corrugated expression of geological forces that operated on timescales that make the entire history of the Third Age look like an afternoon. They are very beautiful and entirely indifferent and far below. Frodo looks down. He finds at a specific point in the range below a high shoulder between 2 peaks, blasted and bare. Its exposed rock the color of old iron, the Redhorn Pass. He recognizes it not from having been there, but from Gandalf's account at the council. from the shape of it against the surrounding peaks, from the specific quality of emptiness that a place has when it is famous for what it will not allow. In another version of this journey, in the version the council was building before the shadow fell, 9 walkers would have attempted that pass. The blizzard would have come, as blizzards come to the Caradhras when the mountain is in a particular mood, and the 9 would have turned back, down into the warmth of Holland and then the choice of the mines. From this altitude, the pass is silent. The mountain has no weather today that is visible from 8,000 feet above it. It is just rock and altitude and the specific abstract quality of a place that exists in the geography of a story that is not being told. He looks at it for a long time. Then he looks at his hand. The ring is on the chain against his chest, tucked inside his shirt, inside the harness, as close to his body as it can be while remaining technically separate from his skin. He can feel it the way you feel a coal wrapped in cloth, not the heat exactly, but the knowledge of heat, the awareness of a potential for intensity that is being managed by the material between them. He has been feeling this since the Shire. He is used to it. He is not used to what happens at altitude. The ring does not speak. It does not have words. What it has is the capacity to make the bearer's own thoughts louder, to take what is already present and amplify it, until the amplification is indistinguishable from an outside voice. What it amplifies now, in the specific enormous silence of the high air with the world spread below like a map of everything a person could want to matter to, is this. He is here because of what he carries, not because of who he is. Remove the ring from the equation and Frodo Baggins is a passenger. A small, slightly uncomfortable body in a leather harness on an eagle's back, being transported south because the eagle is going south and someone decided he should be on it. The fellowship that was being assembled would have had a function for him. A walk through darkness gives a ring-bearer a role. A flight gives a ring-bearer a harness. The ring does not say, "You could be a king." Frodo is not a king-shaped person and the ring is precise about what it offers. What it says, in the language of amplified thought, in the register of a fear that was always present and is now the loudest thing in the high air, is, "Without me, you are already forgotten." The eagles are legend. The eagles will be told of in songs for 3 ages. The fire of Orodruin is a story for the ages. The finger that opened and let something fall, nobody sings about that. Nobody makes a poem about the moment a small person stopped being necessary. The ring is very warm against his chest. He does not put it on. He looks at the horizon instead, south and east, where the sky above the brown lands is beginning to carry the first traces of Mordor's permanent discoloration, the way water carries the trace of the mud upstream from wherever you are standing. He watches the horizon do what horizons do, which is recede at the same rate you approach it, and he holds the sensation of the ring's warmth at exactly the distance he has been holding it for weeks, and he does not move his hand toward it. This is not heroism. Heroism requires the possibility of the alternative. This is something smaller and more durable. It is Frodo Baggins, from Bag End, deciding that the high air is not a good place to make decisions that cannot be unmade. The eagles do not slow. In the Hall of Fire in Rivendell, in the warm, lamplit room where the elves of Imladris have been holding the long memory of the world in song for thousands of years, Bilbo Baggins stands at the window. He is very old. Old in the way that hobbits do not usually become, which is to say old in the way that the ring preserved him past the point where preservation is comfortable. Old in the way of a thing, stretched slightly too thin over its own frame, too many years sitting in a body designed for fewer of them. He has been watching through the window since the eagles cleared the valley's southern wall. He watched Gwaihir take the formation point and the 6 kin echelon out, and then the whole 7 of them were above the trees, and then above the ridge, and then they were small against the sky, and then they were not there. He knows what eagles do. He has ridden one. He remembers the cold of the high air and the specific, vertiginous quality of looking down at a world that looks nothing like it does from inside it. He remembers the sense that the eagle did not particularly care whether he was comfortable. He looks at the empty sky for a while. Then he goes back to his chair. His book is on the armrest, the manuscript he has been working on for years. The memoir, and the red book, and the unfinished poem, and all the other things that a very old hobbit does with the years that the ring gave him to fill. He picks it up. He does not write anything. He holds it and looks at the fire, which is doing what fires do in the Hall of Fire. which is burn with the specific quality of a fire in a room where the air is very old and has absorbed a very great deal of song, and he thinks about the boy from Bag End on an eagle's back in the high air over the misty mountains, carrying the thing that he himself once carried down a road in the dark. He did not say goodbye. He has said too many goodbyes. The book is heavy in his hands. He holds it. The fire burns. The eagles are gone. In the pantry adjacent to the Hall of Fire, Samwise Gamgee sits on a stool at the preparation table with a plate of bread and a wedge of hard cheese and a cup of something warm, eating with the methodical attention of someone who has been told that the best thing he can do right now is eat. He is not on an eagle. He was not selected for the aerial strike. The discussion, such as it was brief. The eagle's back accommodates one small person safely. The one small person the ring requires is the ring bearer. Companions are a walking fellowship's resource, not a flying one's. Sam is a walking fellowship resource. Sam walks. Sam was prepared, for months, to walk a very long way into very dangerous country, beside someone he loves more than he has words for, and instead he is sitting on a stool with bread and cheese, listening to the sound of the falls below the terrace. He finishes the bread. He looks at the cheese for a moment. He finishes the cheese. He carries his plate to the washing basin. He sets it down. He looks out the window that faces south, across the courtyard where the council ground is, across the valley's southern wall, into the sky above the mountains that the eagles flew over an hour ago. He cannot see them. He could not see them 30 minutes after they left. He is looking at empty sky in the direction they went. The way you look at a road after someone you love has walked down it and the bend has taken them out of sight. Because the looking is the only thing available that is pointed the right direction. The sky is very blue and very empty. He turns from the window. He has his pack. He has elven rope and a good cloak and the provisions that Rivendell put together for a long journey on foot, which are excellent provisions, more than he can carry comfortably, put together by people who understood that the road ahead was going to be long and dangerous, and that what you carried on that road was the difference between endurance and its absence. He has nothing to carry. The pack sits against the wall of the pantry with its straps buckled and its contents perfectly distributed, and its weight balanced for a long march. And there is no march, and there is no road, and Frodo is on an eagle that is already over the misty mountains, and Sam stands in the pantry of the last homely house, and looks at the pack, and the pack looks back with the patient. Inanimate availability of objects that have been made for a purpose that no longer applies to them. He sits back down on the stool. He does not know what to do with his hands. Saruman the White has not been wrong about a major strategic variable in 40 years. This is not vanity. It is the record. 40 years of the Third Age's most sophisticated intelligence operation, the network of spies, the careful cultivation of Thodin's court, the Palantir contacts, the breeding program beneath Isengard, the long and patient accumulation of every advantage that a mind of his specific quality can accumulate when it has decided that idealism is for those who have not yet understood how history actually works. He has been wrong about small things. He has never been wrong about the shape of the age. He is standing on the high balcony of Orthanc when the eagles cross his sky. The balcony faces north and east, oriented by design toward Rohan's plains and the distant dark suggestion of the misty mountains, because what a strategist in Orthanc needs to watch is the approach. And everything significant in the Third Age has approached from the north or east. He has been standing here for 2 hours in the cold late October air, turning something over in his mind that has been there since the previous night, when the Palantir showed him nothing useful. The Palantir has been showing him less than usual for 3 weeks. He has been attributing this to Sauron's increasing operational secrecy. He is now revising this attribution. He sees Gwaihir first, then the 6 flanking eagles, then the formation geometry, not a messenger's approach, not the single eagle transit he has seen twice in his centuries of watching these skies. A formation, a directed, purposeful formation moving south and east with a specific quality of bodies that have a destination rather than a route. He does not move. He is Karunr, who was Ol's craftsman before he was anything else, whose fundamental nature is the nature of the maker who looks at a system and reads its purpose from its construction. He reads the formation in approximately 3 seconds. 7 eagles. Formation geometry optimized for cargo protection. Moving southeast at high altitude, on a course that, extended, terminates above the plains of Gorgoroth. He performs in the next 4 seconds the fastest political calculation in the Third Age. If Manwë has sent the eagles, and the Elder King is the only power in existence who sends Gwaihir with an escort, then the ring is being carried to Mordor by divine mandate. The ring reaches Ord Ruin within hours. The ring is destroyed within the day. Sauron's power ends. The war ends. The entire strategic landscape of Middle-earth, which Saruman has spent 4 decades reading and positioning within and preparing for, resolves the calculation's next variable, Isengard. He looks down from the balcony at his ring. Not the ring, his ring of industry, the perfect wheel of his making, the breeding pits and furnaces and the army that has been 7 years in construction. He looks at the Uruk-hai drilling on the training grounds below the tower, the ranks of them moving through their formations with the specific, engineered efficiency of soldiers who were designed from the muscle and sinew outward for a particular kind of war. He watches them move for a moment, with the detached eye of the craftsman assessing his own output. They are excellent soldiers. They are soldiers without a war. The thing about Saruman's specific form of intelligence is that it does not flinch from conclusions that other forms of intelligence would find reasons to defer. He has spent his career in the cold clarity of conclusions others found too uncomfortable to reach. He reaches this one now. In the time it takes the eagles to cross from the northern horizon to the point directly above Orthanc, Isengard was built for a war that is ending while he watches it end. Every Uruk-hai below him is a soldier in a war that will be over before they can be deployed. Every scheme, Thodun's court, the Palantir contacts, the Ring of Isengard, the decade of positioning, was calculated on a timeline where the war lasted years. The eagles have made the timeline 4 hours. He does not rage. Rage is for beings who were not expecting the variable that surprised them. Saruman expected this variable, not this specific event, not eagles on this specific day, but some form of the fundamental risk he has always known his plan carried, that the Valar, who had been absent from Middle-earth's affairs for 3 ages, might not remain absent. He knew this was possible. He built his entire strategy on the assumption that the Valar would continue to stay home, because they had stayed home for 3,000 years and the prior probability favored continuation. He was wrong. The prior probability was wrong. The Valar stayed home until they didn't. He watches the eagles fly over Orthanc and out the other side, south and east, growing smaller against the sky, moving with the unhurried certainty of something that does not need to hurry, because the outcome is not in question. The last eagle clears the southern wall of the Nan Karunir. The sky above Orthanc is empty again. Saruman stands on the balcony in the cold October air, and does not move for a long time. What he is doing is not grieving. He has never grieved, not in the way of beings who form attachments to outcomes rather than to the process of achieving outcomes. What he is doing is more precise and more painful than grief. He is recalculating. Starting from the new foundational fact, Valar intervene, eagles deliver the ring, war ends today, and working forward through the implications for every asset he controls, every relationship he has cultivated, every piece he has positioned on the board of the Third Age. The Uruk-hai below him. No war to fight. They will not simply dissolve. They are living creatures, bred for aggression and hierarchy and the specific violence that Saruman's design encoded into them, and living creatures with no institutional purpose become problems of a different kind. He will need to manage them. The word manage arrives in his thinking with the specific quality of a word that has been demoted. A week ago, deploy was the operative word. Now it is manage. Thodun of Rohan. Gurma in the court. The entire long project of Thodun's corrosion, the specific, patient, year-by-year dissolution of the king's will through Gurma's proximity, was designed to neutralize Rohan as a variable when the war came. The war is not coming now, or rather, the war has ended before Rohan could be a variable in it either way. The neutralization of Thodun accomplished nothing. Gurma has been spending years in a cold hall doing meticulous work in service of a strategy that the eagles made irrelevant in an October afternoon. The Palantir. He looks at the high chamber where it sits in its locked case, the great seeing stone through which he has been carefully maintaining contact with Sauron's will, through which Sauron has been. With the specific patience of a being who thinks in centuries, maintaining contact with his. The stone will now show him what it shows him when Sauron's power is not behind it. Other places, other times. The cold and neutral view of a stone that sees without the dark amplification that Sauron provided. It will still work. It will just show him less of what he was using it to see. He is left with a tower, an army with no war, a corrupted king in a court that no longer needs corrupting, and a seeing stone through which the most interesting view has just ended. He turns from the balcony. He goes inside. He sits in the chair at the Palantir's table. He does not open the case. He sits. Below the tower, on the training grounds of the Ring of Isengard. The Uruk-hai continue their drill. They do not know what passed overhead. Some of them looked up when the shadow crossed the training ground, a brief, reflexive look up, the same animal response to overhead movement that their orcish lineage had encoded in them before Saruman's breeding modified everything else. They looked up, registered large birds, looked back down. Birds are not a threat category that Saruman's training addresses. The formations continue. Left flank, advance, right flank, hold. The drill master's commands come in the guttural command language that Saruman developed specifically for their training. Not black speech, not Westron, but a stripped and functional vocabulary with no words in it that are not operationally necessary. The Uruks respond with the precise drilled responsiveness of soldiers who have been conditioned from their earliest consciousness to hear a command and enact it. One of them, a rear-rank soldier in the right flank formation, distinguished from the others by a notch in its left tusk from a training accident 3 months prior, is in the middle of a ground assault formation when the drillmaster's next command does not come. The formation holds. 5 seconds. 10. The Uruk holds its position with the specific, patient endurance of a body that has been trained to hold positions until commanded otherwise. The drillmaster has gone to speak to another drillmaster. There is a conversation happening near the training ground's edge, both drill masters looking at the sky to the north, and then to the south, and then at each other. The formation holds. In the training ground's specific silence, the silence between commands, which the Uruks have been trained to receive as a condition to endure rather than an instruction to interpret. The Uruk with the notched tusk stands with its weapon in the correct grip and its feet at the correct stance width and waits for the next command. The next command is not coming. Not today, not in the sense that matters, not the command that the entire apparatus of its existence has been oriented toward, the command that is not a drill master's word, but the fundamental operational directive that its breeding encoded into the architecture of its wanting. Move. Deploy. Fight. The war is now. That command is not coming. The drill master eventually dismisses the formation. The Uruk sets down its weapon in the equipment rack with the automatic care of a soldier who has been trained to maintain what it is given. It finds its place in the barracks. It sits. It has no task. Somewhere above it, in the high chamber of Orthanc, the man who made it is also sitting. Neither of them knows what to do with a shovel when there is no more digging. The Uruk sets its shovel against the wall of the pit it has been digging for 7 years. It is a very deep pit. It will not be any deeper. The eye of Sauron turns at the 3rd hour after the eagles depart Rivendell. Not toward Rivendell. The eye does not operate through conventional surveillance, does not sweep a sightline the way a watchtower guard sweeps a perimeter. It operates through the ring, through the specific bidirectional channel that Sauron built into the ring when he forged it, the channel by which the ring always tells him, in the language of pressure and proximity and the particular texture of a will operating near his own work, approximately where it is and what it is near. This channel has been telling him the ring is in the Shire, then on a road, then in Rivendell, then nothing. The specific nothing of a bearer who knows how to suppress the signal, which is the nothing of the channel when Frodo is not wearing the ring and is not in proximity to Orodruin's fire. Then the channel tells him something different. It tells him the ring is moving. Fast. Faster than a horse. Faster than anything that moves on the surface of the world. It tells him the ring is at altitude, at a height that the channel was not designed to process, because Sauron, when he designed it, did not anticipate the variable of a ring-bearer who was also 8,000 feet above the ground on the back of an eagle. The signal is wrong in its geometry, wrong in its direction, wrong in the specific way that a signal is wrong when the reality it is trying to describe does not fit the categories built to describe it. He does not need more than 3 seconds to understand what is happening. The Nazgûl are in the air within 4 minutes of his understanding. This is, by any objective military assessment, an extraordinary response time. The fell beasts are not saddled animals that stand ready in a stable. They are creatures of the deep past, predating the dragons, requiring specific handling in the specific conditions of their attachment to the 9, and getting 9 of them airborne simultaneously in 4 minutes from a standing alert represents the most rapid military mobilization in the Third Age's recorded history. It is not fast enough. The intercept calculation runs itself in the mind of the Witch King of Angmar as he ascends from the plateau of Gorgoroth on his fell beast's back, the wings of the creature finding the thermal columns above Mordor's permanently heated air and using them to gain altitude faster than unassisted wing power would permit. He is the Lord of the Nazgûl, the same will that broke the kingdom of Arnor centuries past, that brought down Arthedain and scattered its people, that has waged war against the Dunedain of the north since long before Gondor ever had cause to fear him. He performs the intercept calculation with the automatic competence of someone who has performed this category of calculation 10,000 times across millennia of warfare. The eagle's approach vector, southwest to northeast relative to Mordor's western border, at altitude. The eagle's speed confirmed superior to fell beast cruise speed from the observed transit rate. The engagement intercept point, inside Mordor's western border above the plateau of Gorgoroth. The time to intercept, 6 hours at maximum fell beast speed. The time for the eagles to reach Ordoruin from their current position at their confirmed speed, 4 hours and 40 minutes. He runs the numbers again. The numbers do not change. He runs them a third time with the specific focused attention of a being whose entire existence for thousands of years has been oriented around the power of the ring, and whose existence ends, or at least undergoes a transformation that the Witch King has no framework for processing, if the ring reaches Orodruin's fire. The numbers run the same. The intercept point is inside Mordor. The intercept time exceeds the ring's transit time by approximately 80 minutes. He is going to lose this race by 80 minutes. The other 8 Nazgûl form on him as they clear Gorgoroth's eastern wall, the formation assembling with the specific, wordless efficiency of beings who share a consciousness architecture, who do not communicate through speech because the ring provides something more direct than speech, a shared orientation toward the ring's location that functions like a compass for all 9 of them simultaneously. They feel his calculation without his stating it. They feel the result. They push the fell beasts harder. The brown lands unreal below the eagles at 4,000 feet. The specific brown of a landscape that was green before Sauron's Second Age pollution reached it, that has been returning to life in the millennia since and has not quite made it yet, that exists in the specific in-between color of something that was killed and is very slowly remembering how to grow. Brown stippled with gray where the rock shows through. Brown going to amber where the autumn has touched the sparse grass. The Anduin somewhere to the west, silver and unhurried. Gwaihir feels the fell beasts before he sees them. The feeling is not fear. This requires emphasis, because everything in Middle-earth that has ever had an extended interaction with a Nazgûl has experienced fear as the primary sensory datum of that interaction. The black breath, the scream, the specific paralyzing cold that the Ringwraiths project through their existence as fear made physical, these have ended battles before the first sword stroke, have turned Gondorian armies that had held their formations through conventional siege into routing mobs through nothing but proximity. Gwaihir is Mondu's instrument. His psychic architecture was not built from the same materials as mortal courage, not the absence of fear, which is what courage is in a mortal context, but the genuine non-presence of the vulnerability that fear requires. The fell beasts cannot make him afraid the way that water cannot make stone wet. He simply does not have the architecture for it. What he feels instead is pressure, the specific directional pressure of 9 large bodies pushing through the same air column he is moving through, coming from the southeast at high speed, with the purposefulness of things that have a vector. He adjusts the formation without signaling. The 6 flanking eagles adjust with him, tightening the escort geometry. The 2 highest members of the formation climbing another 500 feet to gain altitude advantage over the intercept course. He has been in the high air since before the Third Age. He knows what the air feels like when something large is climbing through it to meet him. The fell beasts appear as black shapes against the yellow-gray sky above Mordor's permanent ash cloud. 8 minutes after Gwaihir feels their pressure. 9 of them. The Witch King in the lead, his beast's wingspan broader than the others, the membrane of it casting a shadow on the cloud below that is the shape of something that has been killing things for a very long time. They are climbing, their ascent angle steep, the beast's powerful haunches working against gravity to gain the altitude the eagles already possess. They are climbing up into an engagement. This is the tactical fact that the Witch King's calculation acknowledged, and that the arithmetic could not change. The eagles are already above them. High-altitude engagements favor the party that begins the engagement with altitude advantage, because altitude converts to speed on descent, and speed converts to force, and force applied from above against a target that is still climbing to reach engagement altitude, is the specific geometry that every military tradition in the history of Middle-earth has recognized as favorable to the party that holds the high ground. The Witch King holds no high ground. He is the high ground, on the flat plains of Third Age aerial warfare, because nothing has ever contested him for it. He has operated in the sky above Middle-earth for more than 4,000 years as its unchallenged master, not because he fought for the position, but because nothing with the capacity to fight for it against him ever appeared. He has been the apex, because the sky's actual apex was not present to claim the position. The apex is present now. The eagles do not dive. They do not maneuver dramatically toward the intercept. They maintain their formation and their course and their altitude, and the fell beasts climb toward them, and the mathematics of the convergence runs its course. The black breath goes out ahead of the Nazgûl the way it always goes out, the projected wave of ancient cold and psychic dread that moves faster than the physical bodies projecting it, that arrives before the arrival and does its work in the gap between the first perception and the full encounter. It reaches Gwaihir and finds nothing to work with. It is like a key in a lock for which it was never cut. The mechanism of the fell beast's primary weapon, thousands of years of unchallenged effectiveness against every mortal mind it has ever reached, searches the eagle's psychology for the architecture it requires, and does not find it. The fear response that it needs to trigger is not present. The mortality that underpins mortal terror is not present. What it encounters is the Windlord of the Elder King, in full mandate, carrying the purpose of a Vala who is still alive and still reigning in Valinor, and the Black Breath's cold finds no purchase in that warmth any more than winter finds purchase in the sun. The fell beasts feel this the way weapons feel when they are swung and connect with nothing. There is a specific quality of wrongness that follows a weapon's failed connection, the overextension, the loss of balance, the moment when the wielder's body has committed to an impact that did not arrive. The fell beasts have committed their primary weapon, and it has not arrived. What follows is not a battle. It is a reclassification. The Witch King has a word for this situation, not this specific situation, because this specific situation is without precedent in his long career, but the category it belongs to. The category is the engagement whose mathematics do not support continuation. He has ended engagements before on mathematical grounds. He has done it without ego and without failure, because he understands the difference between tactical withdrawal and defeat, and because thousands of years of staying alive in the service of the ring requires the consistent willingness to accept the mathematical verdict. He runs the revised calculation: eagles at altitude advantage. Eagles immune to black breath. Eagles' speed superior in the descent vector. 9 fell beasts versus 6 flanking eagles and the Windlord, and the Windlord's lineage goes back to Thorondor, who left scars on Morgoth's face, who carried the body of the king of the Noldor from the fields where he fell, who was already ancient when the Witch King's own corruption was new. He is not going to win this engagement. The decision takes him less time than the calculation. He is not conflicted about it. He wheels east with the specific committed movement of a pilot who has chosen a heading and is executing it rather than considering it. And the 8 Nazgûl wheel with him, and the formation, which was climbing toward an intercept that the mathematics had already ruled out, descends back toward Gorgoroth on the long thermal that the volcanic plain generates across its entire extent. The sky above the Brown Lands is empty behind them. The eagles continue southeast. They do not accelerate. They do not adjust. Gwaihir's course has not deviated from the heading he set on departure from Rivendell. The Lord of the Nazgûl, who broke the kingdom of Arnor and scattered the line of the north, who has been the apex predator of the Third Age's sky for more than 4,000 years, who has been the silent terror behind every army that fled before reaching him, descends toward the plateau of Gorgoroth with his calculation running in the silence of his ancient, ring-bound mind. He accepted the result. For the first time in millennia, the Lord of the Nazgûl ran the numbers and went home. The sky is very quiet where he was. The courtyard of Rivendell in the 6th hour after the eagle's departure is the courtyard of Rivendell in the 6th hour after the eagle's departure. This requires saying precisely because the alternative. The thing that should distinguish this hour from the previous one, and the one before that, and the thousands of hours that have preceded today in the accumulated life of Imladris, is not present. The falls are still running below the terrace. The late October light is still doing what late October light does in this valley, which has come in at a low angle off the western ridge and turned the stone of the outer walls the specific amber that the stone turns when the light hits it at this angle in this season. The leaves on the vine along the courtyard's southern wall are exactly the leaves they were this morning. The stone bench near the fountain is the stone bench near the fountain. On the bench, Gandalf sits and does not move. He has been sitting here since the eagles cleared the valley's northern wall. He watched them go, watched Gwaihir take the point and the formation settle into its escort geometry, and then the 7 of them were above the ridge and moving south and east with the specific, unhurried certainty of beings whose arrival at their destination is not a question of whether but of when. He watched until they were gone. Then he sat down on the bench. That was 6 hours ago. The pipe is beside him on the stone. He has not lit it. He is the oldest Maya in a mortal body that walks Middle-earth, and he has spent 2,000 years on roads that most men do not survive for 2 decades. And in those 2,000 years he has carried with him always the specific, animating certainty that the work is his, and the work matters, and the work is not done until it is done. He carried this certainty the way other beings carry weight, not consciously, not as a burden, but as the substrate of his movement, the thing his walking was organized around. The work is done. He did not do it. He sits with this. The specific quality of what he is sitting with is not grief in the conventional sense. He is not grieving a person, not grieving a loss. It is something that requires more precise language. He is sitting with the retrospective reclassification of 2,000 years. This is the most precise description available of what happens when a Maya in a mortal body who has spent 2 millennia doing a specific thing discovers, in a single October afternoon, that the thing he was doing was not the reason the outcome occurred. 2,000 years. He has walked 10,000 roads, more. He has stopped counting the roads. Because the roads have been the point, the roads have been the work. The roads are where the work happens. He has sat in the comfortable holes of reluctant hobbits in the Shire and lit something in them that they did not know was there to light. He has stood on the narrow bridges of deep places and said words that were truer than strategy. He has walked the length of the Third Age as the thing that keeps the long defeat from being total. Not winning, never winning, but keeping the flame going in the people who would have to win it themselves, because they had to win it themselves, because the winning had to be theirs. The Valor sent him here to work through the peoples of Middle-earth, not instead of them. The mandate was specific. The limits were deliberate. The mortal body he inhabits, the gray robes that are not gray anymore, the old man's frame that aches in the cold, the weariness that accumulates across 2,000 years in flesh that was never fully designed for 2,000 years. All of it was the form his mandate took, and the mandate was clear: you do not do it for them. You light the fire and they carry it. That is the rule. That has always been the rule. Manu wrote the rule. Manu just sent 7 eagles to do it for them. He does not understand, and this is the thing he cannot find a way around. He does not understand what the 2,000-year project was for. He has 2 possible readings of the situation, and both of them are unresolvable, and he has been sitting on this bench for 6 hours, going between them like a man pacing between 2 walls in a room that is too small. The first reading, the Astari mission, was preparation that turned out not to be needed, because Manu always intended to send the eagles and was simply waiting for the correct moment. In this reading, Gandalf spent 2,000 years in a mortal body, on Middle-earth's roads, doing work that was a contingency plan for a solution that was going to be implemented regardless. He was the backup. He was the thing that would have been necessary if Manu had not acted. Manu acted. He was not necessary. The second reading, the Astari mission, was necessary, and Manu's decision to send the eagles represents a loss of patience, a moment when the Vala who had been waiting for men and elves to do the thing themselves decided, at the last moment, that the last moment was too close, and overrode 3,000 years of non-intervention policy, because the alternative was too much to accept. In this reading, Gandalf's 2,000 years of work were genuine and real and meaningful, and man looked at the result of that genuine, real, meaningful work and decided it was not enough, and did it himself anyway. He cannot determine which reading is correct. He cannot ask Manu, because Manu does not send answering letters. He can look at the eagles going south and know that he is not on them, and that the ring is, and that this is the Elder King's decision, and that the Elder King's decision is, by definition, correct. But correct does not mean comprehensible from the inside of a mortal body that spent 2,000 years believing it was the instrument of that correctness. He looks at the pipe on the bench beside him. He has smoked this pipe for 2,000 years. In comfortable holes and in the ruins of houses burned by things that the Third Age could not prevent, in the camps of armies preparing for battles they might not survive, on the roads between all of it. Long roads, cold roads, roads in weather that the pipe helped with in the specific, modest way that warmth helps with cold. The pipe is a small thing. It has always been a small thing. He has always been a being who understood the value of small things, who chose the small things deliberately, who carried the small things because the small things were what the mandate was built from, one lit fire in one ordinary heart at a time. He picks up the pipe. He holds it. He turns it in his hands the way you turn a thing when you are trying to remember what it is for. The smoke rings he would have blown would have curled into air that does not need his shapes in it. The courtyard is very still. The falls run below the terrace, patient and indifferent. The light is changing now, the amber going to the specific cool gray of late afternoon in this valley. The color that Rivendell turns when the sun leaves the western ridge and the valley catches the sky's reflected light instead of the direct light, which is beautiful in a quiet way and has no one to observe it particularly. He sets the pipe back on the bench. He does not light it. He does not know, in this 6th hour of sitting, whether he will light it again. Not because he has decided against it, but because the lighting of the pipe was always the gesture of a being with a road ahead of him, and the specific road that has organized his relationship to the pipe for 2,000 years has, this afternoon, terminated in mid-air above the Brownlands. Whether there are other roads is a question he has not yet begun to ask. The question is too large for the 6th hour after. He will need more hours. He may need more years. The gardeners of Rivendell will come through the courtyard in the morning to check the fountain and the plantings along the southern wall. One of them will find the pipe on the bench. She will pick it up and look at it. Old wood, old bowl. The specific worn smooth quality of something that has been held by the same hand for a very long time. She will carry it to the administrative office near the east entrance, where found objects are held for collection. She will describe it, on the record, a pipe, old, found on the bench near the fountain. No name attached, she will not know whose it is. Gandalf is no longer on the bench when she comes through. He is somewhere in the corridors of Rivendell, in the library perhaps, or on the eastern balcony where the view reaches the Bruinen, moving, because sitting had become the wrong size for what he is carrying, and movement, even purposeless movement, is what 2,000 years of roads have given him as a response to things that do not fit in stillness. The pipe sits in the administrative office in a box of other found objects. No one claims it. The air it would have filled with smoke is very clear. The courtyard fountain runs. The western ridge goes dark as the sun leaves it, and the valley fills with the quiet gray of a late October evening, and Rivendell is exactly what it is, unchanged. The falls and the stone and the vine on the southern wall and the bench near the fountain is empty, and the pipe is not on it, and the work is done, and the one who was supposed to do it is somewhere in the corridors, moving without a destination, for the first time in 2,000 years. He does not know where he is going. This is also a first. Samwise Gamgee leaves Rivendell on the 3rd morning after the eagle's departure. He does not leave ceremonially. There is no send-off, no company assembled in the courtyard, no formal acknowledgement of departure. Because departure is what you do when you have been somewhere for a purpose, and the purpose has resolved. And the resolution of this particular purpose happened in the air above the Brownlands 2 days ago without Sam's participation. And there is no ceremony available for the specific kind of leaving that follows from never having arrived at the thing you left home to do. He packs his pack in the room they gave him in the guest wing, the same pack that was prepared for a long journey into dangerous country, which is still prepared for a long journey into dangerous country, which will not be making a long journey into dangerous country. He checks the contents with the methodical attention of someone whose hands need something to do while his mind is doing something else. The elven rope, coiled and tied. The provisions, distributed correctly for weight. The cloak, folded. He does this twice, because checking it once was not enough occupation for his hands. And the second time he finds nothing different from the first time, which is what he expected but needed to confirm. He has Galadriel's gift. This is the fact he keeps returning to during the packing, the thing his mind moves to when his hands have finished a task and the next task has not started yet. The small box of soil from Lothlorien, the silver nut wrapped in cloth at the pack's bottom. They reached him on the 2nd morning, carried by one of Gwaihir's kin, a single eagle, dispatched south. On the same afternoon the formation departed from Mordor, who flew to Lothlorien, took the gifts from Galadriel's own hand, and returned to Rivendell within a day, because an eagle in determined flight crosses in hours what a walking company would have crossed in weeks. Galadriel had foreseen, through whatever channel her foresight uses, that the Ring-Bearer's road would end differently than the council had planned, and had the gifts ready before anyone in Rivendell thought to ask for them. He does not know what to do with a gift given to a version of him that the Eagles made unnecessary. He does not understand why he takes them anyway. But he takes them. The road from Rivendell to the Shire is safe in the way that roads in the Third Age have not been safe for a very long time, and will now, apparently, be safe indefinitely. Safe in the post-Eagle, post-Ring, post-Sauron sense, which is safe in a way that the word itself is not big enough to contain. No Black Riders on the road, no Ringwraiths crossing the bridge at the fords of Brunnen, no darkness gathering on the horizon east of the Misty Mountains that used to be Sauron's ambient presence, the permanent slightly wrong quality of the air in the Third Age that people who grew up in it mistook for the natural state of the world and only recognized as wrong when it was gone. Sam walks through it, and it is very comfortable. He passes through Bree in the second week, the prancing pony, the smell of wood smoke and pipeweed, and the specific, complicated smell of a common room where the same conversations have been happening for centuries. Butterbur is behind the bar. He looks at Sam with the expression of a man trying to place a face that he has no record of having seen, which is the correct expression because Sam has never been to Bree before. In the version of events that did not occur, Sam came through Bree with Frodo and Merry and Pippin, and Butterbur's expression then would have been the same expression that a man who has lived his whole life in a village applies to strangers. Polite. Containing the specific calculation of a publican assessing whether a newcomer is trouble. Sam is not trouble. He is a hobbit walking home from Rivendell. Butterbur gives him a room and a meal and asks no questions, because Butterbur has been running an inn long enough to know which customers want conversation and which want a meal and a bed, and Sam wants a meal and a bed. In the morning, Sam pays and walks out onto the greenway and continues south and west toward the Shire. Nobody tries to stab him. He arrives at Bag End on the 15th day. The gate needs oiling. This is the first thing he notices, the specific mild protest of iron on iron as the gate swings, which he recognizes as a gate that has been used throughout October without the person who usually oils it in late September being present to oil it in late September. He notes this with the automatic attention of a gardener observing what requires doing, and then notes that he is noting it. And then stands with his hand on the gate for a moment, in the specific, slightly strange way of someone who has come back to a place that is exactly as they left it, and was expecting at some level they did not fully acknowledge, to find it changed. Bag End is exactly as he left it. The garden has had 6 weeks of October weather without tending, which means the late flowers are done, and the leaves are down on the lawn, and there are things that could use attention. This is normal October. He has come back to a normal October. He goes inside. He makes tea. He sits at the kitchen table with the tea and the pack and the elven rope and the box of Lorraine soil and the silver nut in its cloth, and he drinks the tea, and he is home. He looks at the box for a long time. Then he goes into the garden with a spade. He plants the silver nut under the party tree. He does not plant it because Galadriel instructed him to. She did not give him instructions, she gave him gifts, and the gifts' purposes were legible from the gifts themselves. He plants it because his hands need something to do that is pointed in the right direction. And the right direction is down into soil, because soil is where things start, and things starting is what hands like his were made to participate in. The hole he digs is small. The root system of the party tree is old and deep and requires negotiation with the spade, careful angling to find the gaps between roots, the specific. Patient work of placing something new in soil that is already full of something established. He has been doing this kind of work since he was 10 years old. His hands know it without his attention. He places the silver nut in the hole. He covers it. He presses the soil down with his palms in the way that ensures good contact between the seed and the surrounding material, the gentle, firm pressing that communicates to the earth that something has been placed here intentionally, which is a thing that Sam believes in even though he would not describe it in those words. He sits back on his heels and looks at the small, dark circle of newly turned soil under the party tree. The Shire is quiet around him. The late October light is doing what it does in the Shire at this time of year, going golden and low in the afternoon, catching the last leaves on the field-edge trees and making them the specific amber that Hobbiton's fields have in the days before the first frost. A cart is moving somewhere on the road below the hill. A dog is explaining something at length from the direction of the Cotton's farm. The Shire is ordinary and comfortable and completely itself, and it did not need the Eagles to save it, because the Eagles saved everything else, and the everything else includes the Shire by containment. He looks at the hole. He was supposed to carry something into darkness. He was supposed to follow someone into a place where following required everything he had, not his skills, not his strength in any conventional sense, but the specific particular thing that was Sam Gamgee and nothing else. The thing that had no name except in its expression, which was, he would not leave. Not when leaving was the reasonable option. Not when leaving was what survival suggested. Not when the person he was following had stopped asking him to stay and the darkness had become the kind of darkness that breaks the will of beings much larger than a hobbit from the Shire. He was made ready for that. He did not know he was being made ready, because readiness of that kind does not announce itself in advance. It accumulates in the small. Daily fidelities of an ordinary life until the moment that requires it arrives, and the ordinary person discovers that the ordinary life was always training for the extraordinary demand. The moment arrived. The eagles took it away before he could meet it. He is very good at sitting with this. He has been sitting with it for 15 days of walking, and he is very good at it now. He has the specific patient relationship with an unresolvable thing that you develop when you have been walking with it for 2 weeks and have discovered that it does not get smaller with attention but does get more familiar. It is like a stone in the pocket. You learn the shape of it. You stop being surprised by the weight. His father comes to the garden fence in the early evening. The gaffer has his pipe and his autumn coat, and the expression of a man who has been watching his son sit in the garden since mid-afternoon and has decided that mid-evening is approximately the right time to come and see about it. "Where have you been, then?" the gaffer says. "Rivendell," Sam says. The gaffer considers this. "Nice, was it?" "Yes," Sam says. The gaffer nods with the specific nod of a man filing information that he does not currently need. "Supper's going," he says. "Your mother made the mutton. I'll be along," Sam says. The gaffer goes in. Sam looks at the small dark circle of soil under the party tree. The evening is coming in across the fields, the specific blue-gray of a Shire October evening that smells of turned earth and wood smoke and the last of the season's grass, and somewhere under the party tree's ancient roots a silver nut is sitting in the dark, doing what seeds do in the dark, which is wait. He does not know if it will grow. He did not earn the soil it is in. He did not walk through the golden wood where it came from, did not cross the mountains and the Emyn Muil and the long miles between here and there. He received it because a lady he never met in person, in a wood he has never walked through, saw, through whatever sight is hers to use, that the gift would be needed here regardless of how the road that brought it ended. He has it because she gave it, and an eagle carried it, and he planted it because planting was what he could do. Maybe that is enough. Maybe it is not. He closes his hand around the small mound of turned soil and holds it for a moment the way you hold something you are not sure you have the right to hold. Then he gets up and goes in for supper. The hole he made is very small. It was the only thing he had to dig. The Ephel Dath, the Mountains of Shadow, define the western edge of Mordor the way a scar defines the edge of a wound, not merely as geography, but as the record of a decision made by the land itself, long ago, about what was inside and what was outside, and what the boundary between them cost to maintain. They are not beautiful. They are not meant to be. Tolkien's legendarium does not give them the quality of beauty that the Misty Mountains have. The Misty Mountains are dangerous and old and magnificent. The magnificence a byproduct of their scale and their age and the specific drama of their weather. The Ephel Dath are not dramatic. They are absolute. They are the color of old iron in the light that Mordor produces, which is not the light of the sky above them, but the light of what is below them, the ambient red-orange glow of Ord Ruin's permanent volcanic activity reflected upward through ash clouds that have been there since the Second Age and have not cleared in the Third. The mountains do not catch this light. They absorb it. They are the darker thing against a dark sky. And the darkness is not the darkness of shadow, but the darkness of intent. The eagles cross the Ephel Dath at the 7th hour after departure from Rivendell. They cross at the northern end of the range, where the mountains are lowest, not low, but lower than the southern peaks, lower than the impassable sections that Tolkien's canonical approaches to Mordor navigate around. Gwaihir does not navigate around. He flies through the gap the way weather moves through a gap, not because it is the easiest path, but because it is the most direct one, and direction is the only navigational principle he has used since leaving Imladris. He is not an army moving through difficult terrain. He is a wind from the north, and the north wind does not negotiate with geography. The air changes the moment they cross the ridgeline. This is the first fact of Mordor's interior. The air is different before you can see the cause of the difference. On the western side of the Eiffeldath, the October air carries the specific quality of Third Age Middle-earth in autumn: the cold, the clarity, the smell of stone and altitude and distance. One ridge crossing later, the air has a different character entirely. Thicker, warmer despite the altitude, because the warmth comes from below rather than from the sun. Carrying particles, not enough to be fog or smoke in the conventional sense, but enough that the eagle's feathers acquire over the first minutes of Mordor's sky a faint gray coating that was not there before. The ash is very fine. It has been suspended in Mordor's atmosphere since the fires of the Second Age, and has never fully settled because Ord Ruin never fully cools. It is the color of the sky above Mordor that establishes the chapter's visual register. Yellow-gray, the specific yellow-gray of an atmosphere that filters rather than transmits the light coming through it, not a storm sky. Not an overcast sky in the normal sense, but the sky of a country that is processing its own internal combustion products through the same air column that its inhabitants breathe, which has been going on long enough that the air and the combustion products have reached a specific, stable equilibrium of discoloration. The sun, somewhere above this layer, produces a brightness without a source. Light without a sun, the flat, directionless illumination of a sky that has become its own diffuser. Against this sky, the eagles, white and gold bronze and vast against the yellow-gray, the formation moving southeast at an altitude that puts them above the worst of the ash layer, but not above it entirely. Gwaihir's primary feathers. The great outer feathers whose individual span would exceed the reach of a man with arms extended, carry the ash the way a sail carries weather, not yielding to it, but accumulating its contact as evidence of passage. He moves through Mordor's sky the way a ship moves through a sea that was not designed with ships in mind, with complete authority and no particular interest in the sea's opinion of his presence. The plains of Gorgoroth unreal below them. From altitude, Gorgoroth is the landscape of the end of things, the specific geological quality of a place where the Earth's interior processes have been given architectural expression in the form of lava fields and ash plains, and the scattered hardened remnants of eruptions that distributed themselves across the landscape and cooled into shapes that nothing alive would produce. Black rock. Gray ash. The occasional vent where Ord Ruin's subsidiary processes find surface expression in columns of sulfurous steam that rise 1,000 feet and then disperse into the ash layer. The whole plain is the color of something that burned long ago and has been thinking about burning again ever since. Ord Ruin is visible from the moment they clear the Eiffeldath. It does not look, from this distance, like the mountain of legend. It looks like what it is, a volcano of middle height, not the tallest thing in the range, its cone shape imperfect from centuries of asymmetric eruption, its summit carrying a glow that is not a fire in the conventional sense, but rather the ambient expression of a permanent internal heat source that has been active since Sauron chose this specific geographic location for his specific geographic purpose. It is distinguishable from the other peaks of the range primarily by the column of material above it, the ash plume that feeds Mordor's characteristic sky. Continuous, patient. The geological exhaust of a mountain that has been doing this since the Second Age and plans to continue. The ring stirs on Frodo's chest. Not physically, the ring does not move. What stirs is the channel, the bidirectional connection between the ring and Ord Ruin's fire where it was made, which has been at low intensity for the entire flight. The distance too great for the connection to fully establish has just crossed the threshold that distance sets. They are close enough now. The fire of Ord Ruin is within range of the ring's awareness of the fire of Ord Ruin, and the ring knows where it is being taken, and the knowing changes the quality of the warmth against Frodo's chest from the ambient warmth of a carried object to the specific directed warmth of a thing that has perceived its destination and is beginning to orient toward it. He puts his hand against his chest, over the shirt, over the ring. He does not press on it. He simply places his hand there, the way you place a hand on something that has moved when you did not expect it to move, to confirm through touch that the movement was real. The hand over his shirt confirms nothing except that the ring is still there, still contained, still on the chain and inside the harness, and not on his finger. He takes his hand away. He looks down at Gorgoroth. From 8,000 feet, the plain below has the specific quality of a thing observed from a distance sufficient to make it abstract, the way a forest from altitude becomes not trees but texture, the way a city from altitude becomes not buildings but geometry. Gorgoroth from 8,000 feet is not orcs and slave camps and the grinding machinery of Sauron's war production. It is pattern, the rectilinear organization of things that were built by a will that thinks in straight lines and right angles, and the specific, administrative geometry of domination. The encampments are organized. The roads between them are straight. The layout of the plain reflects the mind that designed it, efficient, without ornament, optimized for the movement of force from one point to another. Below the formation, something changes. It is not visible from altitude in the way that military movements are visible, not a formation shifting, not a gate opening, not anything that the eagle's elevation would allow them to resolve into specific detail. It is more diffuse than that, a quality of the plain below that is different from what it was 10 minutes ago. The orcs on the encampment walls, which Frodo cannot see as individuals from this height, but can see as the specific dark texture that organized orcish bodies make on light-colored stone, have stopped moving in the patterns they were moving in. The patterns were the patterns of a garrison doing garrison things, patrols, transitions, the organized movement of a system executing its routines. The patterns have simplified. The movement has slowed. The texture of the walls from 8,000 feet has acquired the specific quality that any surface acquires when the things on it have stopped and are looking upward. Every orc on the Ifildath's interior walls has stopped. They are looking up. Not with the focused directional attention of a military response, not the heads-up and tracking movement of sentries spotting an aerial contact and following its course. The stopping is not disciplined. It is the specific, involuntary stopping of creatures that have felt something in the ambient will of their environment change, and have translated that change into the instinctive behavior of prey animals, registering the approach of something above their position in the hierarchy of things that can harm them. Sauron's will is behind their organization. Sauron's will is behind their patrols and their routines and their garrison discipline and everything else that makes them a functioning military garrison rather than a dispersed collection of violent creatures without direction. Sauron's will has just turned, not toward the eagles, not yet, not with the full attention of a god whose power has been organized for 3 ages around the recovery of the ring, but rotated, shifted, the way a compass needle shifts when the magnetic field near it changes. The change is the ring, crossing the threshold of proximity where the channel between the ring and its maker activates. Sauron knows the ring is here. Not here specifically, not the altitude, not the eagles, not the formation geometry. He knows the ring is in Mordor's air. The channel tells him proximity, not position, and the proximity the channel is reporting is inside Mordor and getting closer at a speed that the channel's architecture was never designed to process, because the architecture was designed for a world where things move on the ground. The orcs on the walls are very still. The fell beasts on their perches at the plateau of Gorgoroth's eastern edge are awake and restless, their wings shifting with the specific constrained agitation of large flying creatures responding to a signal from the network that binds them to the Nazgûl. A signal that carries the quality of alarm without the specific content of an order, because the order has not yet been formulated, because the situation has not yet been fully processed by the intelligence that formulates orders. A single piece of black ash from a road ruins column, one of the 10,000 similar pieces falling through the ash layer at any given moment in Mordor's permanent geological exhalation, falls through the formation's altitude and lands on the leading primary feather of Gwaihir's right wing. It is 1 millimeter across. It weighs less than a breath. It makes no sound landing on the feather and leaves no mark beyond a gray speck on the bronze dark surface of a feather that is 7 feet long and has been touched by more significant things than ash. Gwaihir does not notice it. He is the Wind Lord. He flies in volcanic ash the way he flies in cloud, without adjusting, without registering. Because the atmospheric conditions of a mountain range are the baseline condition of his existence, not a hazard requiring management. The ash is the air. He flies through both. The gray speck on his leading primary is the first time Mordor has touched something it could not touch. Mordor does not know this. The ash fell. It lands. It means nothing to the plain below, which has been raining ash on everything for 3,000 years, and for which this particular instance of ashfall is indistinguishable from the previous 10,000 instances and the next 10,000 to follow. It means nothing to the ash. It means nothing to Gwaihir. The formation continues southeast. Orodruin grows from a distant glow on the horizon to a specific particular mountain with a specific particular fire on its summit. And the fire's glow in the yellow-gray sky of Mordor casts a light that is different from any other light in Middle-earth. Older, more specific. the light of the place where the most consequential object in the history of the age was made, which has been burning since before Frodo was born and will keep burning until the moment it stops burning, which will be this afternoon. Gwaihir does not slow. The plain below is very still. He has held this post for 12 years. This is not a figure of speech, and it is not an approximation. It is the precise duration of his assignment to the eastern wall of the Ifel Dath. At the observation point designated in Sauron's garrison records as Watcher Station 7, which is a narrow platform of black stone projecting from the mountain's interior face at an altitude that gives it clear sightlines over the approaches from the north and west. The assignment was given to him by a garrison commander who is no longer a garrison commander. In the administrative reorganization of the Third Age 3006, when Sauron's return to Mordor triggered the expansion of the Ifel Dath's western observation network from 3 stations to 11. He was assigned to Station 7 because the previous occupant of Station 7 had been reassigned to the Morannon expansion. And a body with functional eyes and the specific quality of patience that long observation posts require was needed. And he had functional eyes, and he had patience, and this is how assignments happen in Sauron's military hierarchy. He is good at his job. This requires saying because the tendency of narratives involving orcs is to treat orcish competence as an oxymoron, to present their failure as the failure of brutes, of creatures too stupid to succeed at the tasks they are given. This orc is not stupid. He has been watching the approaches to Mordor's western wall for 12 years, with the specific, developed competence of a professional who has done one thing for a very long time and has become very good at it. He knows the visual signatures of everything that moves in the air above the brown lands, the specific silhouettes of the vultures that patrol the Ash Mountain's southern slopes, the high-altitude circling of the lesser raptors that hunt the sparse grasslands east of the Anduin's Bend, the quality of light that precedes a weather front coming in from the northwest, which looks, at certain angles and in certain light conditions, enough like an aerial contact that he noted it in his log in year 3 and has not been fooled by it since. He has a log. This is the detail that matters for understanding him. He keeps a written record. Not because he was instructed to, the garrison records contain no requirement for individual observation logs at the watch stations. He keeps it because 12 years of watching the same sky taught him early that memory alone is insufficient for the pattern recognition that competent observation requires. The vulture's seasonal migration routes, the weather front's characteristic visual signatures, the twice-yearly transit of the eagle messengers, which he noted in year 1, noted again in year 2. And by year 3 had characterized sufficiently to write, great eagles, messenger transit, northbound, twice yearly, March and September. No threat classification. Do not alert. He is the only orc sentry on the Ifel Dath who knows that the great eagles make seasonal transits. The others see them and reach for the alert bell before his hand is on their arm, telling them, not a threat. I know what these are. Stand down. He knows what eagles are. What he does not know, what his 12 years of observation logs and careful pattern recognition have not prepared him for, is what it looks like when the eagles are not messengers. He sees them at 18 minutes to intercept. This is the number his mind produces immediately, automatically. The way a professional's mind produces the relevant calculation without the professional having to consciously request it. The contact is at extreme range, the formation is moving southeast, the altitude is above his station's sightline, which means he is looking up at them rather than across at them. The speed is... He performs this calculation twice, because the first result seems wrong. And the second result confirms the first result. And the result is wrong in a specific way that his 12 years of watching the sky has taught him to take seriously rather than dismiss. They are too fast. The great eagles in messenger transit move at a speed his log characterizes as moderate cruise, consistent with an unhurried journey of several hundred miles. What he is looking at is not moderate cruise. The formation is moving at a speed that his observation experience maps to nothing he has previously recorded. Not the eagle messenger pace, not the fell beast operational speed, not any aerial contact in 12 years of logs. He does the intercept calculation with the speed his brain provides, and the result is, contact reaches Orod Ruin in approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes at current velocity. He turns to the bell. The bell is a standard Mordor garrison alert instrument, a bronze bowl suspended on a chain, struck with a mallet to produce the specific tone that the relay network is tuned to receive and transmit. Strike the bell, and the signal travels along the relay chain from Station 7 to the main garrison hub in 4 minutes. The garrison hub processes the alert and issues response orders to the relevant commanders in approximately 3 minutes. The commanders mobilize their relevant forces in a minimum of 9 minutes from receipt of orders. Total time from bell strike to response forces in position, 16 minutes. The contact reaches Orodruin in 1 hour and 20 minutes. He does not strike the bell because he is stupid. He does not strike the bell because, and this is the most important thing about him, the thing that distinguishes him from every other orc on the wall. He does the complete calculation before he reaches for the mallet. He calculates forward from the alert to the response to the deployment to the intercept, and the intercept calculation tells him the response forces at their maximum deployment speed arrive at the intercept point approximately 12 minutes after the contact has already passed it. The bell has a function. The function is alert the garrison so the garrison can respond. He strikes the bell when the garrison can respond. If the garrison cannot respond, if the arithmetic between the warning time available and the response time required does not balance, then striking the bell produces not a response, but a noise. He has spent 12 years not making unnecessary noise. The discipline is not policy. It is professional practice, developed across 12 years of standing at a post, where the difference between a useful alert and a panic alarm determines whether the people who respond to your signals trust your signals. He does not strike the bell. He sets the mallet down on the parapet beside the bell mount. He sets it down with the specific care of someone placing something in a defined location where it will be needed later, except that there is no later in which the mallet will be needed. And at some level of his professional cognition he knows this, even as his hands perform the motion of careful placement. The mallet is on the parapet. His hands are empty. He looks at the formation. He has never seen a combat formation of great eagles. He has seen the messenger transits, always single eagles, always the same relaxed flight profile, always northbound or southbound on the seasonal schedule he has logged for 12 years. What he is looking at has no entry in 12 years of logs. 7 eagles in an escort geometry, moving southeast at a speed his experience cannot characterize. At altitude that gives them every advantage the high air can give, on a course that his 12 years of watching the approaches to Mordor has taught him to read as an inbound vector that terminates above Orodruin. He understands what this is. Not the theology of it, not the Valar, not man, not the Elder King's decision to end 3,000 years of non-intervention in an October afternoon. He does not have the framework for that analysis. What he understands is the operational picture, which is a force of unknown capability, clearly inbound, clearly fast, clearly purposeful, is currently inside the observation range of Station 7 and will be inside Mordor's interior before the garrison can respond to any alert he sends. The thing he cannot understand, and this is where his professional competence reaches the edge of what professional competence can process, is what to do instead. His function is observation and alert. He has observed. He cannot alert in any form that produces a useful response. His function, in this specific operational situation, has no applicable output. He is a lock for which the situation has produced no key. He stands at Station 7 on the Effeldath with his empty hands and his 12 years of logs and his professional knowledge of everything that has ever moved through the sky above the Brownlands, and he cannot find a category in his training that tells him what to do when the bell does. Not apply. He watches. He watches the formation cross the ridgeline, the 7 eagles entering Mordor's yellow-gray sky and becoming immediately legible against it. White and gold bronze against the ash-diffused light, enormous against the specific scale of the mountain backdrop. He watches them clear the wall below his station. He watches the orcs on the lower wall stop moving with the involuntary stillness of prey animals registering an apex predator overhead. He watches the ash from Orodruin's column fall through the formation and make no visible difference to it. He watches Barad-dûr, visible from Station 7 as a dark vertical presence above the eastern plain. With the specific attention of someone who has spent 12 years watching that tower for changes in the quality of the light above it, which is how you know, at this distance, when the eye is active and when it is not. The eye is very active, then it is not. The change happens in the time it takes him to blink. Not a gradual dimming, not a slow withdrawal, but the specific instantaneous cessation of a light source that has been turned off. The glow above Barad-dûr that has been the permanent ambient backdrop of every shift he has ever worked at Station 7, 12 years of nights where that glow was always on the eastern horizon. The constant reference point by which he oriented himself in Mordor's confusing geography of darkness and fire is simply no longer there. He looks at where it was. The tower is still there. The structure has not fallen. He can see its silhouette against the slightly lighter sky behind it. But the light that animated it, The specific quality of directed, purposeful illumination that the eye projected, that is gone, and the going of it has a quality that his 12 years of observation have no precedent for. Because in 12 years of watching that glow it has never gone out. In the silence below his station, the Mordor silence that is never actually silent, but is the composite of volcanic sound and distant garrison noise, and the specific ambient audio of a country that is always operating, something changes. It changes the way the glow changed, not gradually, but all at once. The way a sound changes when the largest element of it is removed. The machinery of Mordor, not the physical machinery, which takes longer to stop, but the organizational machinery, the invisible structure of command and compliance and directed will that makes an orc army an army rather than a collection of armed individuals, stops transmitting. He feels this rather than hears it. It is the specific sensation of a system he has been embedded in for 12 years, going silent at its source, the way a nerve goes silent when the signal from the brain stops, which is not the nerve ceasing to exist, but the nerve ceasing to have direction. He stands at Station 7 for a long time after. He does not know how long. Time at observation posts has a specific quality of compression and expansion, long hours of nothing making the hours feel both shorter and longer than they are, and this period has neither the shape of nothing happening nor the shape of something happening. It has the shape of aftermath, which is a category his observation experience also does not have a standard log entry for. Eventually he reaches for the mallet. His hand closes around it and holds it, and he looks at the bell, and the bell is bronze and still, and the garrison relay network is still technically functional, and he is still technically an observer at an active watch station. He holds the mallet. He puts the mallet back. The mallet rolls. He did not set it down carefully enough. He set it down in the motion of a man whose attention is on the horizon rather than on the thing his hand is releasing, and the parapet of Station 7 has a degree of slope toward the outer edge that 12 years of working on it has taught him to account for. That he has accounted for every previous time he has set the mallet down. That he does not account for this time because he is not looking at it. The mallet reaches the edge of the parapet. It goes over. It falls the full height of the Efeldath's interior face, a considerable distance, the distance of a mountain's worth of wall, and lands somewhere in the ash and black rock at the base of the mountain, which absorbs the impact with the specific indifference of terrain that has been absorbing impacts for 3 ages. He does not hear it land. He is still looking east, at the horizon where Barad-dûr's glow was, where the sky above the eastern plain is now the same quality of yellow-gray as the sky above everything else in Mordor, the glow's absence making the plain below it look, from this distance, like a country from which a god has recently departed, and which has not yet worked out what that means. His hands are empty, his bell is still there. The log is open on the observation shelf to today's date. The entry he has not yet written, the entry for this shift, for this contact, for this afternoon, will be the last entry in 12 years of logs. When it is eventually written, which is several hours from now, when his hands have been empty long enough that writing is what they most need to do, it will be a single line in the compressed, functional notation of a professional who has run out of categories: contact, 7 eagles, inbound formation, southeast vector, no intercept possible. Tower dark. War over. Station 7. End of duty. Gwaihir brings the formation down through the ash layer toward the summit of Ord-ruin at the 8th hour after departure from Rivendell. The descent is not gradual. It is the controlled, purposeful drop of a creature whose entire flight architecture is built for this kind of maneuver. The long folding of wings into a configuration that trades altitude for proximity at a rate that no mortal aircraft, had Middle-earth possessed such things, could survive performing. The heat reaches them before the crater does, a wall of rising air. Thermal violence on a scale that exceeds anything in the natural weather of the upper atmosphere, the specific, physical pressure of a mountain's interior expressing itself directly into open sky. Even Gwaihir must work against it. This is worth noting precisely, because nothing else in this story has required visible effort from him, not the flight from Rivendell, not the engagement with the Nazgûl, not the crossing of the Efeldath. The thermals of Ord-ruin's throat are the first physical resistance he has encountered that requires the full engagement of his wing muscle, the deep, working beats of something pushing against an updraft that wants to throw him higher than he intends to go. He holds position above the crack of doom. The fissure below is exactly what the old accounts describe, and somehow more than what the old accounts describe, because no account written by someone standing at ground level, looking into the crack from the narrow stone path that leads to it, can fully capture what it looks like from directly above, a wound in the mountain's summit. Glowing not with the orange of ordinary fire, but with the deeper, more saturated red gold of something that burns at a temperature ordinary fire does not reach. The surface of the magma below moving in slow, viscous currents that catch and release light in patterns that have no fixed rhythm, the heat coming off at invisible distortion of the air itself. Frodo Baggins stands in the harness, braced against the wind that the thermal violence and Gwaihir's wing beats together produce, and looks down into the fire that made the thing he carries. The ring does not argue for power. This is the first and most important fact of what happens in the next several minutes, and the narrator must hold to it precisely. Because the conventional expectation, built from every story about temptation that audiences have absorbed across a lifetime of stories about temptation, is that the climactic test offers grandeur, kingdoms, armies, dominion over the visible world. The ring has used this argument before, on other bearers, because the argument works on bearers who are shaped to receive it. Boromir, who loved Gondor and wanted the power to save it. Galadriel, who loved the world and wanted the power to perfect it. Frodo Baggins is not shaped to receive that argument. The ring has known this since the Shire. It does not waste its address on an offer that will not land. What it offers instead, in the specific, intimate, exactly calibrated way that the ring has always offered each bearer exactly the thing their particular shape of wanting is vulnerable to, is smaller and more precise and, for that reason, more dangerous than any kingdom. Significance. It does not speak in words. It has never spoken in words to Frodo. Not really. What happens between the ring and its bearer is closer to the amplification of a thought already present than the introduction of a new one. The specific mechanism by which the ring takes what the bearer already, secretly, fears and turns the volume up until the fear is indistinguishable from a voice. The thought, amplified, says, "You are cargo." It says, "They took you here. You did not walk here. You did not earn the road the way a story requires its hero to earn the road, through suffering, through endurance, through the specific slow erosion of a self that gets remade by what it survives. You were carried. A bird flew you over the mountains that should have tested you, over the marshes that should have nearly drowned you, over the long miles that should have taught you who you are by demanding everything you have. None of that happened. You are exactly the same hobbit who left Bag End, except frightened in a new way, and you are here not because of who you became on the road, but because of what is on the chain around your neck. Remove me, and you are a passenger who happened to be present at history's hinge. Keep me, and you are the reason the eagle flew at all. This is the ring's genius and its specific cruelty calibrated to this specific bearer. It does not lie. Every word of this is, in the narrow factual sense, true. Frodo was carried. He did not earn this road in the way the canonical road would have earned it. He is, in the most literal accounting available, smaller in this version of events than he would have been in the version where he walked through Mordor on his own 2 feet, and Sam's loyalty, and the long erosion of everything he was. The ring offers him the only form of largeness available to a hobbit who has just discovered he might otherwise have none. Hold on. Do not open your hand. Let the moment of your significance extend by exactly the length of your grip. This is the precise mechanism the narrator must render correctly, because it is the chapter's entire dramatic engine. Letting go requires an act. Holding on requires only the absence of one. Frodo's hand is closed around the ring on its chain, has been closed around it since the heat of the crater first reached the harness, the way a hand closes instinctively around something precious when the body senses danger nearby, not a decision, a reflex. The same reflex that has governed his relationship to this object since Bag End. To do nothing, in this moment, is to keep holding. The ring does not need him to decide to keep it. It needs him only to fail to decide to release it, and inertia will do the rest, and inertia is the easiest thing in the world to provide. To open his hand requires the opposite, an active choice, a specific, effortful unclenching against the instinct that has been protecting this object for months, the deliberate production of the one motion that everything in his exhausted, frightened, smaller than he wanted to be body, is not inclined to produce on its own. He looks down into the fire. He does not think about Gondor, because Gondor has never been his to save, and the ring knows better than to offer him a kingdom that means nothing to a gardener's son. He does not think about armies or thrones or the shape of the world remade in his image. Because none of these images have ever had purchase in him, because he is precisely the wrong shape of person for those temptations to fit. What arrives instead, not summoned, not willed, simply present in the way that the most important things are present without requiring effort to access them, is smaller than any of that. Sam's face at the dock in Hobbiton, the morning they left, the specific quality of worry that Sam wore even then, before either of them knew what worry would eventually be required of them. The smell of the gaffer's garden in October, the wet earth, leaf mold smell that means harvest and the slow turn toward winter, and the specific safety of a world that has always, until this year, simply continued. Rosie Cotton laughing at something at the Green Dragon, a sound from months ago that he had not thought about once on the entire journey and which arrives now, here, 8,000 feet above the fire, that made the most dangerous object in the history of the world, with the specific clarity of something that was never actually forgotten, only buried under more urgent things. These are not heroic. The narrator must not romanticize them into something larger than they are. Because their power is precisely their smallness, they are the counterweight to the ring's offer of vastness. And the counterweight works not because it is heavier in any objective sense, but because it is his, specifically, particularly the way a key fits a lock that was shaped for it, and no other. The ring offers him the world. What answers is Bag End. His hand opens. It is not dramatic. There is no visible struggle on his face that a camera, if this were filmed, could capture as the externalization of an internal war, no clenched jaw, no trembling hand held in suspended tension before the release. What happens is smaller and more total than drama would require. His fingers simply, slowly, uncurl, the way fingers uncurl when the thing holding them closed has finished its work and has nothing further to hold on to. He is not noble in this moment. He does not feel large or significant or heroic. He feels distinctly like Frodo Baggins of Bag End, a person who does not have a throne room and would not know what to do in one, who has never wanted to be the reason anything important happened, who simply, in this specific moment, 8,000 feet above the fire, finds that the weight of the chain in his hand is less important than the weight of everything else he is holding, the garden and the laugh and the smell of October, and that the comparison, when it is finally made directly, is not close. The ring falls. The pause between the opening of his hand and the moment the fire takes it is, by any clock that measures such things, less than 2 seconds. It is the longest 2 seconds in the recorded history of the Third Age. The gold catches the light of the fire below it as it falls, a brief bright arc against the red-gold churn of the magma, small against the vastness of the crater. The most consequential object in the history of Middle-earth reduced, in its final seconds of existence, to the simple physics of a small heavy thing falling toward a larger hot thing. The fire takes it without ceremony. There is no scream, there is no visible release of dark energy, no collapsing tower in the distance, no immediate transformation of the sky. The destruction of the ring is, in this version of the story as in every version, instantaneous and total and, from the perspective of an observer 8,000 feet above it, almost disappointingly undramatic. The gold simply stops being visible. The fire continues to do what the fire has always done, which is burn. Frodo looks at his palm. It is empty. He has been carrying something heavy for so long, heavier in its psychological weight than its physical mass. The specific oppression of an object that requires constant management, constant awareness, constant vigilance against its pull, and now there is nothing there, and the nothing is the lightest thing he has ever held. He flexes his fingers. The hand is just a hand. A small, ordinary hand, slightly calloused from gardening, slightly scarred at the third finger from an old kitchen accident at Bag End, years before any of this began. Attached to a small, ordinary person currently positioned above the Forge of the Dark Lord on the back of a wind spirit, roughly the size of a merchant ship. The hand does not know what to do with itself. It has had a job for months. The job is finished. He closes it again, slowly, into a loose fist, not gripping anything, simply closing. The way you close a hand when you are testing whether it remembers how to be empty. It does not remember yet. It will learn. Gwaihir, sensing through whatever subtle channel exists between an eagle of Manwu's breeding and the small creature strapped to his back, that the burden has been delivered, that the task assigned by the Elder King has reached its completion, begins the climb away from the thermal violence of the crater, his wings finding the cooler air above the worst of the heat with the specific. unhurried competence of a being whose every action has always been correctly calibrated to the moment it occurs in. Frodo looks down once more at the crack of doom as the distance between them grows. The fire is just fire now. It has always been just fire. The ring was the thing that made it consequential, and the ring is gone, and the mountain continues its ancient, patient burning the way it has burned for longer than anyone's memory, and will burn for longer still, indifferent now to everything except its own geology. He looks at his open, empty hand one more time. Then he closes it, tucks it against his chest for warmth against the cold of the climbing altitude, and does not look down again. Barad-dûr does not fall the way towers fall in the stories that get told about falling towers. There is no single moment of collapse that an observer could point to afterward and say, that was when it happened. No explosion, no visible structural failure, no instant in which the eye registers transformation. What happens to the Dark Tower in the seconds after the ring enters the fire of Arwen is something closer to a foundation being deleted from beneath a structure that was never, in any physical sense, dependent on that foundation, which is to say, the stone does not move, and yet everything the stone was for is gone. The eye goes first. It does not dim gradually, the way a fire dims as its fuel exhausts. It is present, and then it is not, the specific, instantaneous quality of a thing being switched off rather than a thing burning down. The light that has stood above Barad-dûr since the Second Age, the permanent ambient signature of Sauron's directed, will turn outward upon the world in a single, unblinking column of malevolent attention. Simply ceases. The tower remains. The eye is gone. For a structure whose entire architectural and symbolic purpose was to be the visible seat of a watching will. The absence of the watching is a more complete demolition than fire could have produced. Then the tower itself begins, slowly, to lean. This is not collapse in the conventional engineering sense. No foundation has cracked, no load-bearing wall has failed under physical stress. What happens to Barad-dûr's structure in the minutes after the eye's extinguishing is closer to what happens to a body when the will that has been holding it upright through sheer force of intention finally lets go. A slow, settling, almost peaceful subsidence. The great black tower easing toward the earth with a patience that the violence of its 3,000-year history never once displayed. It will take the better part of an hour to fully come down. No one is watching it closely enough in that hour to find the exact moment it crosses from standing to fallen, because everyone capable of watching it has something more immediate to attend to. At the Black Gate, the armies of Mordor are arrayed in the specific. Vast geometry of a force that has spent months preparing for an assault that the West was never going to mount in this version of the war. The numbers are extraordinary. Regiments of orcs from every breeding pit and garrison between the Morannon and the southern provinces, the war engines positioned along the wall in the configurations that Sauron's military engineers calculated would break whatever force the West managed to assemble, the Haradrim contingents and the Easterling cavalry that arrived in the weeks before, all of it organized, all of it pointed west, all of it waiting for an enemy that Aragorn was never going to lead here. Because Aragorn never had a reason to march on the Black Gate in a war that ended above Arwen in the time it takes an eagle to climb a thermal. The formations hold their positions in the seconds after the eye goes dark. This is muscle memory, the specific. Trained discipline of soldiers who have stood in formation long enough that standing in formation has become a default state requiring no active will to maintain. They do not know, in the first seconds, what has happened. They know only that something in the ambient quality of the world has changed, the way a room changes when its loudest sound suddenly stops. The formations hold for approximately 4 minutes. This is the precise, measurable interval, the narrator should render it with this exactness, between the moment Sauron's directing will is removed from the field and the moment that removal becomes operationally undeniable to the individual soldiers experiencing it. 4 minutes of discipline running on inertia. The body continuing to do what the body has been trained to do, while the underlying structure that gave the discipline its purpose dissolves beneath it. Then the formations do not break. They do not rout. Rout requires an enemy to flee from, a specific locatable threat that produces the specific locatable terror that turns an army into a panicked crowd. There is no enemy here. The West's armies are not approaching the Black Gate. There is nothing to flee from. What happens instead is stranger, and, in its way, more total. The formations simply lose the only thing that was holding their shape, which was never discipline in the human sense, but something closer to gravitational organization. Every orc in the host oriented around a center of command the way iron filings orient around a magnet. The magnet is gone. The filings do not fly apart violently. They drift. An orc near the rear of the eastern formation, unremarkable, unnamed, distinguished by nothing the narrator can identify because nothing distinguishes him from the 10,000 orcs arrayed around him except his specific position in the formation at this specific moment, sets down his spear. He does not decide to do this in any sense that would survive close examination. The spear has been in his hands for the better part of 2 days, held at the ready position that his sergeant drilled into the formation across the preceding weeks, and the holding of it has become, like the Uruk's shovel at Isengard, like the sentry's mallet on the Efeldath, a habit sustained by purpose rather than by the spear's own weight. The purpose has gone. The spear remains heavy in a hand that no longer has a reason to keep it raised. He sets it down. The orc beside him, observing this without registering it as observation, simply noticing, in the peripheral way that creatures notice the behavior of those nearest them, sets down his own spear a few seconds later. Not in imitation, exactly, in the same loosening. The same absence of reason to continue holding what holding has stopped serving. Within the hour, the formation at the Black Gate is a field of orcs without weapons in their hands, standing in the loose, directionless arrangement of creatures who have nowhere in particular to be, and no one in particular telling them where that nowhere should be. Some of them sit. A few, at the formation's edges, begin walking, not fleeing, not advancing, simply moving in directions that feel marginally less arbitrary than standing still, the way a compass needle that has lost its magnetic north will still settle somewhere, even if the somewhere means nothing anymore. The orc who set down the first spear picks up a piece of black volcanic stone from the ground near his feet. He turns it over in his hand. It is an ordinary piece of stone, indistinguishable from 10,000 others on the plain of Gorgoroth, and he looks at it with the specific, blank attention of a creature examining an object, because examining an object is, in this moment, the only available activity that resembles purpose. He sets the stone down too. Everything is being set down. The spears, the stones, the war engines whose crews have drifted away from their stations, the banners whose bearers have let the poles tilt until the fabric drags against the ash. There is no enemy to defeat and no victory to claim, because there was never a battle, only the sudden, total withdrawal of the will that the entire vast machinery of Mordor's military existed to serve. The thematic weight of this chapter rests on a fact the narrator must not soften. Nobody won this. There is no army of the West standing triumphant on the field, no Aragorn raising a sword above a defeated enemy, no Rohirrim charge that broke the siege and gave the soldiers of Gondor a story to tell their children about the day the world turned. There is simply a vast number of armed creatures who were oriented, for their entire existence, around a center that is no longer there. Discovering in real time that orientation without a center produces not freedom, but a specific, disorienting drift, the condition of a population that has never once been asked to want anything for itself. Encountering, for the first time, the silence where wanting used to be supplied from outside. Some of them will walk east, back toward whatever remains of Mordor's interior settlements. Some will walk in no particular direction at all and simply stop somewhere on the plain when the walking produces no more sense of purpose than the standing did. A small number, the ones whose original nature, the captured and corrupted elvish light buried beneath generations of Morgoth's breeding, retains enough coherence to register the absence of compulsion as something other than emptiness. Will begin, in the weeks and months that follow, the slow and uncertain process of discovering what an orc does with itself when nothing is commanding it to do anything. The narrative does not resolve what that process produces. No one in this story is positioned to observe it closely enough to say, the war is over. It ended without a battle, without a charge, without a single named soldier of the West raising a blade against a single named soldier of the East. It ended the way a candle ends when someone pinches the wick rather than the way a fire ends when it burns through everything available to it. Fast, clean, and almost embarrassingly undramatic, given everything that 3 ages of accumulated dread had led every observer of this war to expect from its conclusion. A piece of black stone sits on the ash of Gorgoroth, set down by a hand that had nothing else to do with it. Above the plain, 7 eagles climb away from the thermal violence of Orodruin's throat, their work complete, already turning northwest toward the long flight home. Below them, an entire army finishes the process of forgetting what it was for. The coronation of Aragorn, son of Arathorn, takes place on the first day of May, in the city of Minas Tirith, before the gathered representatives of every free people who can be summoned across the months since the war ended above a volcano none of them saw. The delay is not a mystery requiring explanation away. There was no siege to recover from, no city to rebuild, no wounded to tend in the thousands the canonical war would have produced. But there was also no urgency. No enemy at the gate forcing a hasty crowning to steady a frightened populace. Denethor, steward of Gondor, took the months that followed October with the careful, administrative patience of a man whose city had not been tested and therefore did not need to be reassured in haste. Word had to travel to Rohan, to the elves of Lothlorien and Rivendell, to the dwarves of the Iron Hills, to the scattered Nadain of the north, and travel, in a third age without eagles assigned to courier duty, still moves at the speed of horses and the patience of distance. The coronation that in canon was hurried by necessity is, in this telling, slowed by the absence of it. Every detail of the ceremony is correct. This must be stated plainly, because the chapter's tragedy depends on the audience understanding that nothing has gone wrong in any procedural sense. Denethor II, Lord and Steward of Gondor, presides over the office himself, alive, clear-eyed, and entirely undiminished, because the despair that broke him in the canonical war was the specific product of a siege that never came, and a palantir that showed him a catastrophe that never happened. He has had 7 months to watch his city remain whole. He performs the office with the careful precision of a man who has studied the old forms and intends to honor them completely. The steward's rod is presented and broken in the traditional manner. The crown of the Blackened Menrians, the winged crown of Elendil's line, kept in its vault beneath the citadel through 1,000 years of the steward's long vigil, is brought forth and placed, by Denethor's own hands, upon the head of the heir of Isildur. The genealogy is read, the lineage is confirmed. Gandalf himself, present and grey and quiet, in a way that those who knew him before this spring find difficult to name, stands at Aragorn's side as the closest thing to a witness the Old Order can provide. Everything about the ceremony is, in the narrow legal and ceremonial sense, exactly as it should be. The problem is the crowd. The Pelennor fields below the city are green with the unbroken grass of a battlefield that was never a battlefield. This is the detail that the camera, the narrator's eye, must return to throughout the chapter. Because it is the physical fact beneath everything else that follows, there is no scarring on this ground. No mass graves dug in the weeks after a siege. No burned siege towers left as monuments at the field's edge, no section of wall still bearing the marks of the battering ram that broke it, no specific stretch of grass where the local memory says that is where the Rohirrim charged, that is where Thodin fell, that is where the Witch King met his end. None of it happened. The siege was lifted before it began. The army of Mordor that should have crossed the Anduin and broken against Minas Tirith's walls dispersed on the plains of Gorgoroth, 400 miles away, in an event that the city's population experienced not as a battle, but as a rumor, a series of reports arriving over the following days, each one stranger than the last, describing eagles and a darkened tower, and an army that simply stopped. The people of Minas Tirith are alive. Their sons are alive. Their walls are intact. By every measure that matters to a population's continued existence, this is the best possible outcome a city under siege could hope for. And they are standing in the court of the citadel watching a coronation with the specific, polite attentiveness of an audience watching a ceremony whose significance they have been told about, rather than lived through. Aragorn stands on the steps of the White Tower with the crown of Elendil's line upon his head, and he does not know what to do with his hands. This is the detail the chapter holds longest, the specific physical fact that the narrator must render with complete precision. Because it carries the entire psychological weight of everything this chapter argues, these are hands that have been training for 87 years toward a specific kind of competence. Hands that know the weight and balance of Andril, reforged from the shards of Narsil specifically for this war. Hands that know the particular grip required to crush an athelas leaf correctly, releasing its healing properties at the precise moment a fevered patient most needs them. Hands that have held the tiller of a corsair vessel taken at Pelargir, that have gripped the worn leather of a ranger's bow through 40 winters in the wild lands of Eriador, that were trained across 8 decades for the specific. Accumulated competence of a king who proves his kingship through what his hands do in the worst moments available to test them. None of those moments arrived. The hands trained for a war that an eagle's wingspan made unnecessary. He stands with the crown on his head and his hands at his sides, and the specific stillness of them, the stillness of competence with no current application, is the detail that everyone in the crowd registers without being able to name what they are registering. He looks, to the people watching from below the citadel steps, exactly like what he is, a king whose claim is legally and genealogically perfect, and who has not yet had the opportunity to become, in the eyes of the people kneeling before him, the specific, irreplaceable figure that a crisis survived together produces. They cheer. The cheering is genuine, relief is genuine, gratitude for a war's ending is genuine, the specific civic pleasure of a coronation after 1,000 years without a king is genuine. But it is the cheering of an audience, not the cheering of survivors recognizing the man who survived alongside them. There is no soldier in this crowd who can say, "I saw him at the Black Gate. I heard him name himself to the mouth of Sauron. I watched him lead the charge that should have killed us all and somehow didn't." There is no one who can say any of this, because none of it happened, because the war that would have produced these stories ended 400 miles away in an event that the city experienced as a rumor with eagles in it. Arwen Unmeal stands beside the dais in the gown that was prepared for this day in Lothlorien, months before either of them knew what shape the day would actually take. She came from her grandmother's wood to give up the gift of her people for this man, chose mortality, chose the long fading of years and the specific, irreversible arithmetic of a life that ends, for the sake of a love that she has never once, in all the months since the choice was made, regretted making. This must be held clearly. She does not regret it. The love is real. The man beneath the crown is exactly the man she chose, unchanged in every quality that made the choosing worthwhile. What she watches, standing at the edge of the dais while the crowd below cheers its polite, genuine. Insufficient cheer is something more specific and more painful than regret. She watches her husband's hands at his sides, and she understands, with the clear sight that her own long life has given her, exactly what those hands were trained to do, and exactly how completely that training has been rendered moot. She gave up forever for a man who never had to prove, in the way that the old songs require proving, that the forever was worth the cost. This is not his fault. She has thought about this carefully, in the months since the rumors of eagles began arriving from the east, and she has arrived at the conclusion that there is no fault to assign, not to Aragorn, who did everything his 87 years of preparation equipped him to do, and would have done all of it again if the war had required it, not to the eagles, who answered a mandate from Avala, whose decisions are not subject to the approval of an elf maiden watching a coronation she helped imagine differently, not to man, whose choices exist on a scale that makes the question of fault almost a category error. There is no one to blame. There is simply the specific, quiet fact that the story she walked into is not the story she was promised. And the difference between the two will not show itself today, in the cheering and the crown and the genuine relief of a city that did not have to bury its dead. It will show itself later, in the years ahead, in the quiet evenings when Aragorn looks out over a peaceful realm and wonders, in the specific way that competent men wonder about competence never tested, whether he would have been equal to what the old songs demanded if the eagles had not made the demanding unnecessary. She will be there for those evenings. She chose that too. She watches him receive the crown and thinks, he will spend the rest of his very long life wondering, and I will spend the rest of my much shorter one watching him wonder, and neither of us will ever have the answer. Because the question that would have produced the answer was, mercifully and unbearably, never asked. In the lower city, in the stables behind the 6th Circle barracks, a young man named Bregel brushes the coat of a grey gelding that has never carried a rider into battle. He is not present at the coronation. He has not been invited, because stable hands are not invited to coronations. And this is correct and unremarkable in the way the world has always worked. He is doing, on this morning, exactly what he has done every morning for the past several months, tending the war horses of the Citadel's cavalry reserve, maintaining the specific exacting standard of conditioning that a horse trained for battle requires, the muscle tone built through controlled exercise. The desensitization to the sound of horn calls and the clash of steel achieved through weeks of careful, repeated exposure, the particular calm under pressure that distinguishes a warhorse from an ordinary one. He trained 6 horses for this specific purpose across the spring and summer, working from manuals his predecessor left him and the oral instruction of an older groom who had prepared horses for the campaigns of Aragorn's grandfather's generation. He learned the commands. He learned the specific sequence of desensitization exercises that prevent a horse from bolting at its first cannon fire equivalent, the controlled noise, the gradually increasing intensity, the patient weeks of work that turn a green horse into a mount that will hold its line under the worst pressure a battlefield can produce. None of his 6 horses went to battle. There was no battle for them to go to. He brushes the gray gelding's coat in the quiet of the stable, the specific, repetitive motion of a groom, whose hands know this work the way Aragorn's hands know the grip of a sword, trained, competent, currently without application. The gelding stands calm under the brush, exactly as it was trained to stand calm under far worse than a grooming brush. Exactly as it will likely stand for the rest of its working life, because there is no war coming for it to apply its training against. He does not think, in any words he could articulate if asked, the specific thought that the narrator must render for him. He had cleaned the stalls of the horses that never had to ride to battle. He simply brushes the coat until it is perfect, because the coat being perfect is the only form the morning's purpose can currently take, and a stable hand who has spent months preparing the most well-conditioned cavalry reserve in the city's recent history brushes a horse that will never need any of it, with the same careful attention he would have brought to the preparation if the war had come. The gelding does not know it is the best prepared horse in a city that will never need it. It simply enjoys the brushing, the way horses enjoy most attentive grooming, and leans very slightly into the strokes, and Briegel continues. And somewhere above them, in the court of the citadel, a king with perfect hands and no story stands beneath a crown that fits him exactly, and a cheer that means well and falls, in every way that matters, short. The eagles do not stay for the coronation. This is the fact that closes the saga, and it must be rendered with the same plainness with which everything else about the eagles has been rendered across this story. They do not wait for thanks, because thanks is a mortal transaction, and they are not mortal participants in this world's economy of gratitude. Gwaihir and his 6 kin clear the Efeldath on the same afternoon the ring goes into the fire, climbing northwest above the Ash Mountains and the Brown Lands and the long gray ribbon of the Anduin, retracing in 4 hours what had taken the canonical fellowship months to walk in the version of this story that did not happen. They do not hold a council before departing. They do not wait to be told the war is won, because they already know the knowledge arrived with the ring's destruction the way the alarm had arrived with the ring's proximity, instantaneous and complete, requiring no messenger. They fulfilled the mandate. The mandate is fulfilled. There is nothing further within the scope of what man sent them to do. And so they do the only thing that makes sense to beings whose loyalty is to Avala rather than to the gratitude of the peoples they have just preserved. They go home. The silence they leave behind, over the smoking plain of Gorgoroth and the slowly settling ruin of Barad-dûr, is the silence of a completed transaction. The Valar came back. They did what was necessary, in the specific, total, undebatable way that the Valar do things when they finally decide to do them. And then they left, because the world that comes after is not theirs to live in. It never was. The Fourth Age belongs, by every rule that the Astari mission was built to honor and that the Eagle Strike has just spectacularly overridden, to the men who are in it. Nobody asked the men of Middle-earth if they were ready for this. The narrator's eye in this final accounting must move once more through the kingdoms before settling on its closing image, not to recap, but to hold each piece long enough for its weight to register as part of a single, completed ledger. In the Citadel's archive, a scribe is already drafting the official chronicle of the war's end, and the draft keeps stalling on the same problem: there is no battle to describe. The chronicle of every previous war in Gondor's long history follows an established form: the muster, the engagement, the casualties, the victory or the retreat. This chronicle has none of those elements. The scribe writes, crosses out, writes again. The official history of the War of the Rings ending will eventually be 3 paragraphs long, and 2 of those paragraphs will describe rumors rather than events, because the actual ending happened 400 miles away, in the sky, to nobody who survives to give a Gondorian scribe a first-hand account. At the Black Gate, the dispersed armies of Mordor continue their slow, directionless drift across the plain of Gorgoroth, a population discovering, in real time and with no guidance, what it means to want something for the first time. The narrative will not follow them further. No one in this story is positioned to. In Rivendell, Gandalf has begun, in the weeks since the courtyard, to walk again. Not toward anything in particular, but the long roads of Middle-earth still exist, and a body that has walked them for 2,000 years does not simply stop, because its mandate has been quietly revoked from above. He does not know yet what the rest of his time in Middle-earth is for. He will spend years finding out. The narrator does not resolve this. Because Tolkien's own theology does not resolve it, some questions are given to be lived with rather than answered. In the Shire, a silver nut sits beneath the roots of the party tree, doing in the dark what seeds do, which is wait. 30 years pass. The narrator allows this leap because the chapter's final argument requires distance, requires the long view that only decades can provide. The perspective from which a single age's character becomes visible rather than merely its events. The tree that grew from Sam Gamgee's planted nut is by the 3rd decade of the 4th Age, the tallest tree in the history of Hobbiton, taller than the old party tree it was planted beside. Its silver and gold leaves visible from the Bywater Road on clear autumn mornings, the way a lighthouse is visible from open water. Sam is mayor of the Shire by then, elected 7 times running by a population that trusts him completely and has no idea in any specific sense why. He tells his children about Rivendell. He tells them about the eagles, the great wings crossing the valley, the shadow that meant the war was already over before it had properly begun for the rest of the world. He tells this story well. He has had 30 years to refine it. He does not tell them about the pack he carried home unused. He does not tell them about sitting on a stool in a pantry with bread and cheese, looking south at empty sky. He does not tell them about the specific, particular weight of having been prepared for something that never arrived to need the preparation. That part of the story belongs only to him, and he has decided, across 3 decades of quiet consideration, that some things are not improved by being shared. The Shire is green. It has been green for 30 years without interruption, peaceful in a way that no previous age of its history has managed to sustain, comfortable and unchanged, and entirely safe. High above the White Mountains, in air too thin and too cold for anything mortal to survive unaided, Gwaihir the Windlord rides a thermal in the patient, wordless rhythm of a creature whose life is measured in spans that make a single age look like a single afternoon. He does not think about the ring. He never thought about it the way the rest of this story has had to think about it. As temptation, as burden, as the central fact around which an entire age organized its dread. To Gwaihir it was cargo, delivered, the specific task assigned by the Elder King, and completed within the bounds the king set for it. He does not think about the Hobbit either, beyond the simple factual register that something small and frightened once sat against his neck feathers for the length of one long flight, and is, presumably, still alive somewhere in the green country far below. He thinks, if thinking is even the correct word for what passes through a mind built on Mon W's purposes, rather than mortal memory. In the long patient rhythms of a being whose work is occasionally, briefly, the hinge on which history turns, and who does not need to watch what happens on the other side of that hinge to know that the turning was correct. Because correctness was never his question to ask. It was Man W's. It was answered before the wings ever opened over Rivendell's valley. The world below him is small and green and, for the first time in thousands of years, entirely at peace. He turns north, toward the high, silent peaks where the eagles have always made their homes, in the cold, clean air above every age that mortals will ever measure their lives against. He does not look back. The Age of Men began the only way it could have begun in this version of the story. Not earned, not forged in fire and lost the way every previous age had been earned, but given, handed down whole and intact and untested from a sky that the men below had not realized was still watching. They were left with everything. They have not yet discovered whether everything was enough.